They say people never forget how you made them feel, and that night at the plaza I learned why. As the weight of a decade's lies shattered like glass underfoot. I am Victoria Langford, heir to a Manhattan dynasty of wealth and influence, married to Daniel, whose charm once felt like sunlight, but now burned like a hidden flame. The ballroom glowed with golden chandeliers, their light dancing on mirrored walls that reflected the perfect life I'd crafted over 10 years. 80 guests, the city's elite, sipped Dom Perignon as a string quartet played Clair de Lune, and I sat in my champagne-colored gown, the same perfume from our wedding day clinging to me like a fading memory. Beneath the elegance, a storm brewed. Daniel's smug smile hid a betrayal I was poised to unveil, one that would crack open truths deeper than infidelity, threatening my name, my legacy, my heart. The air buzzed with anticipation, drawing everyone into a night they'd never forget, where celebration would turn to reckoning. It was our 10th anniversary, and the ballroom shimmered with opulence. Gold-leafed name cards, lavender peonies, the Langford crest carved into an ice sculpture. I wore the same fragrance from our wedding, a scent of hope now soured. Daniel, my husband, stood, raising his glass with that practiced grin that won every room. To love, to family, to 10 incredible years. A guest whispered, expectant. He cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming tonight," he began, voice polished. "A decade of marriage is a lifetime of memories, and it's time I was honest." His tone dipped, eyes locking on mine with a smirk. "Victoria, you've disgusted me since our wedding night." A glass slipped, shattering. My mother gasped. Someone laughed, nervous. Daniel stood taller, savoring the shock. 10 years I've played the loving husband, tolerating this cold, insipid facade. "I'm done pretending." He didn't finish. I rose, smoothed my gown, and nodded to the AV technician. Our signal rehearsed. The lights dimmed, the projector flared, silencing the quartet mid-note, the sound lingering like smoke. "What is this?" Daniel muttered, his glass unsteady. I didn't answer. The screen flickered, then darkened. Gold serif letters proclaiming 10 years of happiness. The irony stung. Our first dance song began, soft and haunting. The opening frame showed me in my wedding dress, twirling, smiling at a man I loved. Daniel stared back, his face unreadable. The room hushed, tension coiling. Whispers rose. "Is this their wedding video?" My hand stayed calm, my jaw set as I watched my life unravel before the stunned crowd. Daniel paled. "Victoria, what is this?" he demanded, louder. I ignored him, letting the truth unfold. This wasn't a montage, it was an indictment, and we were just beginning. Memories flooded me. His late nights, his distant touches, his secretive glances at his phone. I'd built our life on compromises, each smile hiding doubts now roaring to life. The video shifted, clips I'd curated with precision, each a blade aimed at his lies. Guests shifted, their elegance too tight for the raw truth. My heart pounded, not with fear but with clarity. This was no whim, it was days of planning, a puzzle revealing not just an affair but an invasion. 3 days ago, I'd found his phone. Unlocked, its secrets the spark for this fire. The moment I closed the binder, the air in my study felt too thick, as if the walls themselves were pressing in with the weight of Daniel's deception. I sat there, the leather still cool under my fingertips, staring at the photograph of him outside that failed startup, his younger face smug even in defeat. The realization that our entire marriage was a calculated maneuver burned through me, not with the heat of anger, but with a cold, surgical clarity. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I paced the penthouse, my bare feet silent on the hardwood, replaying every moment of our life together. Every dinner, every smile, every whispered promise. How had I missed it? The way he'd linger on calls, the way his charm seemed to sharpen in boardrooms, the way he'd dismiss Chloe's questions with a distracted pat on the head. I'd been too busy building our perfect life to see the cracks he'd carved into its foundation. But now, with his phone's secrets laid bare, I couldn't unsee them. The text from Ashley, "Kitten," still seared into my mind. "Can't wait to try on the new set. You said red was your favorite." My stomach churned, not just at the betrayal, but at the audacity of his carelessness, leaving his phone unlocked on the nightstand like a taunt. 3 days before the anniversary, I'd come home early with a migraine, the kind that throbbed behind my eyes like a warning. That morning had started like any other. Coffee in the Langford kitchen, its marble counters gleaming under the morning light. Chloe, our 9-year-old, had been chattering about a school project, her stuffed fox tucked under her arm as she ran out the door. Daniel was halfway through a business call with Ashley, his voice clipped, professional, but his eyes flicking to his phone with a private intensity. I told him I wasn't feeling well, and he barely looked up. "Go rest," he mumbled, scrolling through something I couldn't see. I'd nodded, too tired to question the dismissal, and left for a meeting that ended early. By noon, I was back, the penthouse eerily quiet, like it was holding its breath. I headed to the bedroom, kicked off my heels, and was about to collapse when I saw it. Daniel's phone, abandoned on the nightstand, its screen glowing faintly. Daniel never left his phone unattended. He carried it like an extension of his body, always angled just out of my sight. I stared at it, the silence amplifying my pulse. Then I picked it up. The screen lit up instantly. A message preview blinked at the top. "Can't wait to try on the new set. You said red was your favorite." The sender's name, Kitten, hit me like a slap. My throat tightened, but my hands, trained by years of charity galas and boardroom speeches, moved with steady precision. I unlocked it. Chloe's birthday, a passcode he never bothered to change. The text thread with Ashley Monroe, his 28-year-old executive assistant, unfolded like a confession he never meant to make. "I hate pretending you're just my boss," she wrote. "I hate seeing you go home to her." His reply? "Just 3 more days, let her have her anniversary. The second it's over, I'm done playing house." Another message followed. "Don't worry about the prenup. My attorney says if I wait until after the anniversary, I can walk away with half. Half my name, my home, my child's future." I scrolled through photos, Daniel and Ashley at the Four Seasons, in his office after hours, one of her in my robe, the silk I'd chosen for its softness now a mockery. I sank onto the bed, the phone burning in my hand, but tears didn't come. Instead, something inside me shifted, like a door slamming shut in a house I hadn't realized was haunted. I didn't confront him. Not yet. The next morning, I met Miles Grayson for coffee at a discreet cafe, its low hum shielding our conversation. I'd met him years ago when he helped my father unravel a corporate embezzlement ring, his sharp eyes and quiet competence unforgettable. I recounted everything: Daniel's texts, Ashley's photos, the plan to exploit the prenup, my voice steady as if narrating someone else's life. Miles listened, nodding occasionally, his pen hovering over a notepad. "So what do you want exactly?" he asked. I met his gaze. "I want proof. Timelines, photos, locations, conversations, everything." He tapped his pen. "That'll cost you." I didn't flinch. "Money's not a problem. This isn't just about divorce, it's about exposure. I want the world to see what he is." Miles raised an eyebrow. "End goal, Victoria?" I stirred my coffee, the spoon clinking softly. A celebration he'll never forget. But that wasn't all I found on his phone. Beyond Ashley's messages, there were others, older, cryptic, from a contact labeled LC. One read, "Keep her happy until the board vote. We'll handle the rest." My mind snagged on the initials, a faint memory of Lillian Carter, a lawyer in my father's firm, her polished smile always carrying an edge. I didn't mention her to Miles yet, but I filed it away, a puzzle piece I'd returned to. Instead, I focused on the immediate. Daniel's plan to wait out the anniversary, to claim half my inheritance, to dismantle the life I'd built for Chloe. I thought of her that morning, her small hand clutching her fox, asking when Daddy would read her a bedtime story again. The memory fueled me, not with rage, but with purpose. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for her, for the legacy I'd promised her, a life untainted by his lies. Miles promised results in 3 days, and I spent those hours in a strange limbo, playing the role of devoted wife while planning its destruction. I smiled at Daniel over dinner, my fingers brushing his sleeve as I suggested a video for Chloe, something she can watch when she's older, about our love. He grinned, arrogant, oblivious to the trap. I moved through the penthouse like a ghost, noticing details I'd ignored. His cologne lingering on a jacket, the way he locked his office door at night. Each observation sharpened my resolve, like a blade honed for the gala. The city outside pulsed with its usual rhythm, but inside me a storm was gathering, quiet but relentless. I wasn't the soft, naive Victoria he'd banked on. I was something else now, someone who'd learned to wield silence as a weapon, who'd turn his own script against him in a way he'd never see coming. That storm inside me grew as I left the cafe, Miles's promise echoing in my ears like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. I returned to the penthouse, slipping back into the role of the unsuspecting wife, but every glance at Daniel now carried the weight of what I knew, and what I was about to learn. The city streets blurred past my taxi window, skyscrapers towering like silent witnesses to the unraveling ahead, their glass facades reflecting a distorted version of myself. No longer the soft outline he'd counted on, but sharper, more defined. Chloe's laughter from her room that evening pierced me, a reminder that this wasn't just my fight. It was hers too, protecting the innocence he threatened to shatter. I tucked her in, her small arms hugging the stuffed fox, and whispered goodnight, my voice steady despite the chaos brewing. Sleep evaded me again, my mind mapping out contingencies, lawyers to call discreetly, accounts to review in secret, as I waited for Miles' delivery. Each tick of the clock, amplifying the anticipation of truths that would either break me or forge me anew. It only took Miles 3 days to pull apart the illusion I had spent a decade believing in. He sent the files over in a sleek leather binder, no digital copies, no emails. He knew what he was doing. I opened it in my study, the soft jazz playing in the background, suddenly too cheerful, too fake. The first page was a photo. Daniel, 10 years younger, standing outside a failing tech startup in Brooklyn. Beside him, a foreclosure notice taped to the door. That was 3 months before our wedding. The next page showed a timeline. His business collapsed in the spring of that year. 2 weeks later, he started dating me. I flipped to the next section. Phone records, bank statements, social media screenshots. Daniel hadn't just fallen in love with me, he had targeted me. My family name Langford opened doors in Manhattan most people didn't even know existed. We didn't just attend the Met Gala. We funded part of it, and Daniel knew that. He didn't pursue me for love. He pursued me for legacy. He introduced himself at a gallery opening my father sponsored, pretending it was a coincidence. He researched my interests, mimicked my values, inserted himself into every space I occupied. Every move was calculated. By the time he proposed, the Langford board was already considering him for a junior position. He played the long game, and I had been the grand prize. One page in the file showed a note Daniel had written to his former college roommate. Marrying Victoria isn't just a win, it's security. Once her father steps down, I'll be in a position to steer the company. She's too soft to notice. I stared at that sentence until the letters blurred. She'd been wrong about a lot of things, but that was his biggest mistake. I closed the binder slowly, my hands cold. It wasn't just betrayal, it was invasion. He had studied me like a blueprint. Designed a role, played it flawlessly, but now the script was mine to write. I called Miles back the same evening. I need a favor, I said. I want you to help me film something. He hesitated. What kind of something? I looked out the window where the city pulsed beneath me like a sleeping beast. A wedding video, I said. Only this time it won't be a lie. The evidence didn't stop at the timeline. Miles had dug deeper, uncovering emails from Daniel's old partners lamenting his risky bets that sank the startup, and how he'd boasted about landing a Langford as his bailout. There were grainy photos from that gallery opening, him lingering in the background before approaching, his smile practiced, predatory. I traced my finger over the pages, each detail a brick in the wall of my resolve, but also a sting. How had I been so blind to the performance? The jazz record scratched to a halt, leaving silence that mirrored my inner void, soon filled with plans for the video that would turn his weapon against him. Chloe's drawing on my desk caught my eye, a family portrait in crayons, our figures holding hands under a sunny sky. For her, I would ensure the clouds parted permanently. The night before the anniversary, I stood in my dressing room, staring at my reflection in the gilded mirror, practicing a smile that wasn't soft or apologetic but sharp, unyielding, like the edge of a blade. The penthouse hummed with the quiet anticipation of a stage before a performance, but this was no gala rehearsal. It was the prelude to a reckoning. I'd spent the day finalizing the video with Miles, weaving together the damning evidence he'd gathered into a narrative that would unravel Daniel's facade in front of everyone he'd charmed. Each clip, his smug confessions, Ashley's stolen glances, the timeline of his calculated courtship, was a stitch in a tapestry of betrayal I'd display for all to see. Chloe was already safe at my mother's estate in Connecticut, her small suitcase packed with her stuffed fox and a promise of a weekend with Grandma. I'd told her it was a special trip, my voice steady as I kissed her forehead, shielding her from the storm I was about to unleash. The lie felt heavy, but necessary. She didn't need to witness the wreckage of her father's making, not yet. The next week, I told Daniel I had an idea. "Let's make a video for Chloe," I said sweetly, brushing my fingers across his sleeve at dinner. "For our 10th anniversary, something she can watch when she's older." He raised an eyebrow. "A documentary, something like that," I said. "Us talking about love, about family, about how we made it this far." He grinned, arrogant as ever, fully embracing the public image. "Exactly," I whispered. "Exactly." He never noticed the camera angles were too professional. He never questioned the sound guy's background in courtroom surveillance, and he definitely never noticed that Chloe wasn't home anymore. I had already moved her to my mother's estate in Connecticut, far from the storm I was about to unleash. The morning of the anniversary, I stood in front of the mirror in my dressing room at the plaza and practiced my smile. Not the soft one I used at charity luncheons, not the proud one I reserved for Chloe's school plays. This was different. This was the smile of a woman who had finally stopped apologizing for being too patient, too trusting, too blind. The smile of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. I touched up my lipstick and smoothed my gown. The stylist hovered nearby, fussing over the hem. "You look radiant," she said. I nodded, not really hearing her. Somewhere beneath us, the ballroom was being prepared. Gold-trimmed name cards, lavender and white peonies, the Langford crest carved into an ice sculpture. Everything Daniel ever wanted. Everything he believed was still his. When I stepped into the hall, Daniel was already there, sipping champagne with Ashley. "Of course," he brought her. I had insisted. "She's part of your team," I had said innocently. "It's only fair." Ashley wore a red satin dress, too tight for the occasion. She clung to his arm like a trophy. They looked rehearsed, like they had practiced their betrayal. I didn't flinch. I greeted them like a hostess should. "You made it," I said warmly. Ashley blinked. Daniel narrowed his eyes. "You look different," he said slowly. "Lighter," I replied. "It must be the lighting." But it wasn't the lighting. It was the weight of deception lifting, replaced by the certainty of what was coming. I'd spent hours with Miles's team, editing the video to ensure every frame cut deeper than the last. We'd included a clip of Daniel laughing with Ashley in a hotel hallway, timestamped just days ago, and another of him on a call, plotting to freeze my accounts post-divorce. But the heart of it was Chloe, her small voice asking why Daddy was always working late, her tears captured in a moment I'd filmed months ago, not knowing then how it would fit into this indictment. The ballroom's elegance felt like a mockery now, its opulence, a stage for his downfall. I moved through the crowd, my champagne glass untouched, my smile a mask that hid the fire within. Daniel thought he controlled this night, but I'd rewritten the script. As the pianist began to play, I took my seat, my mother's searching glance meeting mine across the table. She sensed something, but I gave nothing away. The stage was set, and I was ready to pull the curtain. The ballroom's golden glow dimmed as the projector hummed to life, casting a hush over the crowd like a curtain falling on a play no one expected to see. Daniel's toast hung unfinished, his words, "I'm done pretending," still echoing as the screen flared with gold serif letters. 10 years of happiness. The irony tightened my chest, but I sat composed, my hands folded, the champagne glass beside me untouched, its bubbles catching the fading light. Guests shifted, their murmurs a mix of curiosity and unease, expecting a sentimental montage. Instead, the first clip played. Daniel, a decade younger, in a cheap suit, laughing into a camera. "Of course I married her," he said, voice dripping with arrogance. "You think I'd pass up a Langford?" The room froze. A fork clattered against a plate. My mother's hand tightened on her napkin. Daniel's face drained of color, his glass trembling as he hissed, "Victoria, turn it off." I didn't move, my eyes fixed on the screen, letting his own words carve the wound deeper. Her dad's practically a god in Manhattan. She's sweet, naive, the kind who says yes before asking what she's signing. The video cut to hotel surveillance footage, time-stamped last Tuesday, hours after he'd claimed to be in D.C. for meetings. There he was with Ashley, their laughter spilling through a hallway, a stolen kiss in an elevator. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ashley, in her too-tight red dress, shrank in her seat, her face as pale as the table linens. Daniel reached for the remote, but it wasn't there. I'd made sure of that. I controlled this now. The screen shifted again, softer, more devastating. Chloe, cross-legged on her bed, clutching her stuffed fox. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming home?" her small voice asked, recorded months ago during a moment of quiet hurt. My off-screen voice, gentle. "He's working late, sweetie." Her frown deepened. "He's always working late. Does he not like being here?" The room's silence was suffocating, broken only by a muffled sob. Maybe Ashley's, maybe mine, I couldn't tell. Then Chloe's voice cracked. "Did I do something wrong?" The frame paused on her tear-streaked face, and the ballroom seemed to hold its breath, shame hanging heavy in the air. Daniel shoved his chair back, chest heaving. "This is disgusting," he barked. "You're using our daughter." I stood, my voice calm but cutting through the room like a blade. "Don't you dare say her name like she's a prop in your story. She's the only reason I waited this long." He opened his mouth, but the final clip played. Daniel in his office, whispering into a phone. "No, she won't see it coming. Once the paperwork's filed, I'll freeze the accounts. She's too busy playing mommy to notice." The guests' murmurs turned to stunned silence. I walked to the center of the ballroom, stopping beside him. "You said you married me for legacy," I said, my voice steady. "But my legacy isn't a name. It's knowing when to walk away and when to fight." I pulled a sleek envelope from my clutch and handed it to him. "These are divorce papers. My lawyers have secured everything in my name. Your access is gone. The apartment, the accounts, the firm. They've seen the footage." Daniel stared at the envelope, his bravado crumbling. "You can't do this," he muttered, voice barely audible. "You need me." I leaned in, just close enough for him to hear. "You were right about one thing," I whispered. "I was too soft, but softness isn't weakness, it's restraint. And tonight I've stopped holding back." He sank into his chair, eyes darting across the room, finding no allies, not even Ashley, who was edging toward the exit, her face ghostly. But the night wasn't done. Henry Ashcroft, my father's old friend and chairman of Langford Industries, stood, holding a leather folio in Langford blue. "I wasn't planning to speak," he began, his voice sharp, "but since we've seen the truth unfold, it's time to finish what Victoria started." He looked at Daniel. "You didn't just lie to your wife, you lied to the company, signing false disclosures about your relationship with Ms. Monroe." He opened the folio. "Her promotion, her bonuses, the share transfers, it's all here. You're not just accused, Daniel, you're removed." The room stirred, a low hum of shock. Henry turned to me, placing the folio before me. "Victoria, your father always said you had both heart and spine. It's time to prove it." My hands didn't tremble as I signed the executive control documents, each stroke reclaiming a piece of myself. Daniel was still frozen when the side entrance opened, and 4 uniformed officers stepped in. "Daniel Langford," one said, "we need you to come with us." He laughed, bitter and sharp. "For what, a bad marriage?" The officer's face was stone. "Fraud, insider trading, misuse of company funds." They cuffed him right there in front of the guests he'd once dazzled, his charm now a faded costume. Ashley gasped, but no one listened. The ballroom's elegance dissolved into chaos, the ice sculpture dripping, the quartet silent. I stood at the center, feeling the weight of every step that brought me here. Not triumphant, but resolute, knowing this was only the beginning of a longer fight. The morning after the gala, my phone buzzed relentlessly, a swarm of notifications that felt like bees stinging my already raw nerves. I stood at my parents' Connecticut townhouse kitchen counter, stirring tea I wouldn't drink, the steam curling upward like the chaos I'd unleashed. Outside, autumn leaves fell in crimson and gold, a quiet contrast to the headlines screaming across every news outlet. Langford heir exposes husband's betrayal, insider scandal rocks Manhattan elite. Chloe played upstairs with my mother, her laughter a fragile anchor in the storm. I'd told her we'd live apart from Daddy for a while, that she'd stay with Grandma for peace. She'd nodded, clutching her stuffed fox, asking if it could come too. That moment cracked something in me. Not the media frenzy, not the viral clips of Daniel's arrest, but her innocence, untouched by his poison. I turned on the TV, wincing as the screen replayed my toast to truth, spliced with grainy footage of Daniel and Ashley in that elevator, his smug grin now a public disgrace, His lawyer's statement, claiming doctored videos and vendettas, felt hollow. The footage was too real, the damage too deep. By noon, my migraine pulsed, untamed by pills. I paced the living room, the Persian rug soft under my feet, trying to outrun the weight of it all. Board members called, their voices a mix of shock and cautious support. Reporters hounded my assistant for quotes. Even distant cousins, absent from my life for years, sent texts feigning concern. I ignored them, my focus narrowing to Chloe, to the life I'd rebuild for her. Around 3, a knock startled me. Miles Grayson stood at the door, his dark coat dusted with leaves, holding a manila envelope. "Told you I deliver," he said, a half smile breaking his usual stoicism. I let him in, the envelope heavy as he placed it on the coffee table. "Final report," he said. "Financial breakdowns, travel logs, some offshore accounts that aren't exactly legal." I sat across from him, arms folded. "Will this help the SEC?" He nodded. "They've opened a case. You might get your day in court, or 10. Miles lingered, his eyes searching mine. "One more thing," he added. "Look at page 42, it's odd." He left without explanation, the door clicking shut behind him. I waited until Chloe was asleep, the house silent, before opening the envelope. I flipped past spreadsheets, photos, and timelines until I reached page 42. There it was, a scanned letter from Daniel, dated 2 years before our wedding, addressed to Lillian Carter. Subject, premarital agreement strategy. My blood ran cold. "Dearest Lily," it began, closing with "yours always, D." He outlined a plan to marry me for access to Langford Investments, to keep me satisfied until he gained power, even mentioning one heir to seal the bond. Lillian, my father's former lawyer, had helped him. She'd shaken my hand, smiled in boardrooms, all while plotting to make me a pawn. My hands shook as I dropped the letter, the betrayal no longer just Daniel's, but a conspiracy that invaded my entire life. The next morning, I met Miles at a quiet Upper East Side cafe. I slid the letter across the table. "What do you know about her?" He didn't blink. "Lillian Carter, former corporate counsel, left Langford 6 months after your wedding. Now on a hedge fund board, run by Ashley Monroe." I clenched my jaw. "So Ashley was the bait, Lillian the architect." Miles nodded. "Your father likely suspected. He locked down voting shares before he passed, never giving Daniel full control." The realization hit like a wave. My father had tried to shield me. I leaned back, the cafe's hum fading. "Can you find where Lillian is tonight?" Miles' eyes narrowed. "You want a confrontation?" I shook my head. "An audience. Somewhere public, where she can't hide." My voice was steady, fueled by a fire that wouldn't dim until every thread of their scheme was exposed. The Women's Executive Alliance Gala glittered under the historic conservatory's chandeliered ceilings, a constellation of power and ambition, where I'd once preferred the shadows. Tonight, I stepped into the spotlight, my navy silk dress a quiet armor, its understated elegance masking the storm within. Miles had secured me a speaking slot, leveraging the media frenzy that now painted me as the Phoenix wife, a label I neither sought nor rejected. Lillian Carter was here, listed as a keynote speaker on ethical leadership, a cruel irony that sharpened my resolve. I arrived late, deliberately, as plates were cleared, the room's chatter dimming when I entered. Faces turned, some with sympathy, others with curiosity. But my eyes locked on Lillian at a corner table, scrolling her phone, her pristine composure untouched by the scandal. Our gazes met for a fleeting second, her spine stiffening, but I'd already won that silent exchange. I took the podium, my heels clicking against marble, each step a declaration of intent, the weight of Daniel's betrayal and my father's foresight fueling me. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady, slicing through the room's expectant hush. When I was asked to speak, I doubted I belonged here. For years, I let others shape my narrative, my career, my marriage, my silence. But recent events taught me that power isn't just a title. It's holding your ground when it's designed to collapse. Lillian's fork paused midair, her face paling as I continued. I spoke of a man who promised forever while planning my undoing, of those who aided him. Legal help, trusted help. The thing about trust, I said, is it's louder when it breaks. And mine broke so loudly, the city heard. The room stirred, a murmur of recognition. Lillian's hand trembled, reaching for her wine. "To those who write our names in contracts while erasing our dignity," I said, looking directly at her, "we see you now. Seeing is the first step to justice." The applause was sharp, like a verdict. and I left the stage, letting the silence on Lillian's face speak for her. The next morning, James, my father's former attorney, called, his voice tight. "There's something your father left," he said. "In the vault under his old office." I hadn't been there since his funeral, when Daniel's crocodile tears masked his lobbying for control. Now, as CEO, I walked into Langford Industries' steel-walled vault, the air cold and heavy. James opened a drawer, labeled V. Inside, a leather box held an envelope in my father's handwriting, dated 6 months before my wedding. "Victoria, if you're reading this, something I feared has come to pass. I suspected Daniel wasn't who he claimed." Attached was a rewritten prenup, voiding Daniel's claims, and a business card. Miles Grayson, Private Investigations. I laughed, alone in that vault. My father had sent Miles years ago, laying an escape route I hadn't seen. Tears stung my eyes, not for loss, but for the love he'd hidden in precautions, protecting me when I thought I'd face the fire alone. Lillian never approached me at the gala, her brittle silence louder than words. I didn't need her confession. Exposing her was enough. Back home, I sat with Chloe's latest drawing, a fox under a starry sky, and felt the weight of my father's legacy. Not wealth, but foresight, ensuring I'd rise. The city outside buzzed, but I was steady, ready to close this chapter and write the next for Chloe, for us, with a strength forged in truth. The rain tapped softly against the wide windows of our new downtown apartment, a quiet rhythm that felt like the city exhaling alongside me. Chloe's laughter echoed from her bedroom, where she painted a mural of foxes and stars, her small hands smearing colors with a joy that anchored me. Weeks had passed since the gala, since Lillian's silent defeat and the vault's revelation of my father's love, and the media storm had evolved into a steady hum. Daniel's indictment now a courtroom sketch on evening news, Ashley's resignation a footnote, Lillian's quiet exit from every board a whisper among the elite. I stood in the Langford executive office, my father's old desk now mine, gazing at Manhattan's skyline, no longer feeling like an imposter but a woman sharpened by betrayal, claiming her place. The board's emails carried trust, not tension, and I'd begun writing a letter to Chloe. Not for today, but for years from now. Here's what your father did, and here's how we rose. Daniel's face was everywhere, now framed in courtroom sketches and news tickers that read, "Former CFO indicted." Ashley vanished from the public eye. Rumors swirled of her resignation, of a plea deal, of panic. Lillian quietly stepped down from every board she held a seat on, citing personal reasons. I never heard from her again. I didn't need to. Some endings don't require confrontation, just exposure. One rainy afternoon, Miles dropped by unannounced, holding a white envelope. "Last piece of the puzzle," he said. "It's from a source inside the DA's office. They wanted you to have it." Inside was a copy of Daniel's police statement, not for public release. Just one line stood out. I thought I could outsmart her. I never thought she'd fight back. I folded it, slid it into the back of my journal. That's all it was now. A footnote in the story of a man who underestimated the wrong woman. Court hearings loomed, but emotionally, I was done. I helped Chloe paint her mural, her giggles filling the space where ghosts once lingered. My mother visited, quieter now, her eyes softer, perhaps seeing what she'd missed in Daniel's charm. We rebuilt, not just walls but bonds, her presence a balm. One evening, I returned to the Historic Conservatory for a charity dinner, the same place I'd exposed Lillian. An organizer whispered, "They're still talking about your speech, the one where you didn't name names but everyone felt it." I smiled. "That wasn't a speech," I said. "It was a beginning, and it was. A life not defined by betrayal, but by reclamation. A legacy for Chloe, not of wealth, but of dignity." As I walked home under a quiet sky, city lights reflecting in puddles, I realized justice isn't always loud, but healing is thunderous. It ripples through generations. The sweetest revenge isn't destruction. It's living free while they drown in their ruins. To anyone betrayed, underestimated, made small, you're not weak for trusting, but powerful for choosing yourself. Strength isn't silence. It's speaking, walking away, rebuilding on your terms. The best revenge is becoming everything they said you'd never be, without them. The rain slowed, a gentle patter now, as I sat by Chloe's bedside, her mural glowing faintly in the lamplight. She slept, her fox tucked close, and I watched her, my heart full of a quiet thunder. My father's precautions, my own fight, had carved this space, a home free of lies. I whispered to the dark, "We're here, Chloe. We're enough." The city softened beyond the glass, its pulse a lullaby, and I closed my eyes, not to escape but to rest, knowing tomorrow we'd paint more stars, write more truths, and live unbound. Healing wasn't a moment but a melody, soft yet unshakable, carrying us forward.